Sweet. I'm so happy.
Let's talk Jesus.
Whether a on today's episode, we are talking about the Bible when they're reading through it. I like to double the down. You would have thought that I walked into a church, dropped trowel, and a big turd right on top of the altar. Of course it's divinely inspired. Everyone knows it's written by the hand of God. So today's episode is the Bible, whether to read it literally or figuratively, and I'm schnitzel. I don't know if I like that, because I got access to all the Twitters, all the Googles. They went f***ing ballistic. Do you know who the f*** you are talking to? Well, right. They can't say that. That's not what the Bible says. We don't give a flying f***. I know I've got some Christians out there that's going to be like, oh yeah, they're not. We're born into sin, Bretty. Now, do we believe that every single thing in the Bible is true? If you do, let's talk about Genesis. People are inherently born good. Johnson, former United States Most Wanted Cybercriminal, now good guy, and host of the Brett Johnson Show. On today's episode, we are talking about the Bible. That's right, the Bible. We're going to talk about whether one should take a literal approach or a figurative approach, an allegorical approach, when they're reading through it. Now, why are we talking about that today? Well, it turns out, so, I've got a couple of editors. I've got an editor and a producer, Shayna and Brian, and they do an outstanding job. I've got to tell you, no shit about it. I am beyond ecstatic with the way the show is turning out. I truly am. It's like I finally am clicking on all cylinders, or firing on all cylinders. That's how I feel about it, and it just keeps getting better every single time. Well, there are some shorts that get put out. One of the shorts that got put out, 4 or 5 days ago, had to do with yours truly, that being me, questioning whether the Bible was divinely inspired. And let me tell you in no uncertain terms, the feedback on that, you would have thought that I walked into a church, dropped trowel, and shit a big turd right on top of the altar. That's what you would have thought. I did not do that, but you, by God, would have thought I did. I had them coming out. They are still coming out of the woodwork. Of course it's divinely inspired. Everyone knows it's written by the hand of God. It's not written by the hand of God. It's written by man. Well, yeah, but he told them what to write, man. He told them what to write? Are you sure he told them what to write? Because the last I checked, he ain't talked to anybody in a couple of thousand years. Don't confuse me with the facts. That's what happened. At least that's the way that I view it. What I believe in doing is when I piss somebody off and I believe in what I'm saying, I like to double the fuck down. So today's episode is the Bible, whether to read it literally or figuratively. And I'm guessing that my viewers know exactly which side I'm going to fall upon. Before we get to that, we've got to check in and talk about a couple of things. I was recently, and when I say recently, just like 3 or 4 days ago, I was over in Berlin, Germany. That's right, I keynoted the Pentera, not the Pantera, the Pentera 2024 conference. They do pen testing, and they are outstanding. Stayed at the Intercontinental Berlin. I have to tell you, I did not get out of the hotel whatsoever. I was exhausted. The time change took its toll on me. I spent my day watching Alice in Borderland on Netflix, and I've got to tell you, I kind of like it. I'm a big fan of Squid Game and that old sci-fi movie series called The Cube. If you've not seen it, it's outstanding. You should watch it. Now, did not make it out of the hotel there. I used to live in West Germany back when it was called West Germany. Lived there for 3 years. My dad was in the military, so we toured and lived all over the United States and internationally as well. Lived 3 years in West Germany. While I was there, I acquired quite the taste for German bread, German brats, and schnitzel. And that was when I was maybe 6 years old. It turns out that one's palate changes from the time they're 6 to when they turn 54. I am not a big schnitzel fan anymore. I am a German potato salad fan there, but here's a nice little tidbit of information. They don't call it German potato salad over there. They just call it tater salad. That's all they say. Give me some of that tater salad. Now, my wife, she makes a very good German potato salad. I got over there, ordered the potato salad, and I've got to tell you, it's nothing like what my wife makes. And I'm assuming that it varies from wherever you are in Germany, but this had cucumbers in it.
What?
I know. That's what I thought too. I looked at it, like, that fucking thing's got cucumbers in it. And then I took a bite and I was like, I don't know if I like that. Then I took another bite. I was like, I don't know if I like that. Then I took another bite, and before I knew it, I had finished container number 1. Container number 2 got polished off later that night as I was watching like episode 4 of Alice in Borderland, which gotta tell you, I wasn't even going to comment on this, but you know, the new Mad Max movie is out, Furiosa. Except it's not a Mad Max movie, it's a Furiosa movie. And it turns out that evidently that fucking movie is tanking. And I mean tanking. It's going to be lucky if it crosses the $31 million mark for the Memorial Day weekend, which puts it at the lowest Memorial Day blockbuster in history, like in 48 years. Now, my thought on that, people don't want to see pissed off Furiosa. They want to see Mad Max because it's fucking Mad Max.
Yeah.
I liked Tom Hardy, but you know what we really need? We need Mel Gibson back playing old man Mad Max. He can be grumpy. He can be anti-Semitic if he wants to. I don't really give a shit what the dude does as long as we've got him in the Australian, not the African, mind you, the Australian outback in that fucking Ford, roaming the land with his trusty pup, looking for gas, looking for food, and killing every fucking thing that walks. Because we know that's really what I want to do. I fantasize that I don't want to be James Bond. I want to be Mad Max. All right, before we get into the Bible, it's time to bitch, moan, and complain about some stuff. I hate them all. There ain't no f***ing way. You don't want to hear about this bullshit. Bitch, moan, and complain. You are full of poo. All right, so we're bitch, moaning, and complaining. Before we get to that, you'll notice that I've got my trusty Buc-ee's cup. Now, Shayna is from Texas, which is where Buc-ee's originates. And she just told me that she has never been to a Buc-ee's. And I told her, well, Shayna, you need to go. Because I tell you what, Buc-ee's, that's right, Buc-ee's has the absolute cleanest shitters throughout the entire United States. It is a joy. It is an absolute joy to walk into a Buc-ee's bathroom, drop trowel, and squeeze out a couple of chunky turds. Jesus. I'm just saying, it's that pleasurable. Why, hell, the Virgin Mary, her blessed self, would be proud to eat off of those floors. Just saying. Just throw that out there. Now, what we're actually bitch, moaning, complaining about today, it turns out, Denali National Park. No, it is not sponsored by GMC or Chevrolet. Turns out that it was named Denali National Park long before those expensive-ass SUVs and trucks. It also turns out that the Biden administration, and you'll love this, now this is a United States national park, and they have forbidden workers there to display or fly the American flag, saying, and I quote, that it distracts from the park experience. My response is, what the actual fuck? It's a U.S. national park. Now look. First of all, let's be honest. Probably nobody actually complained about that. Probably we've got some numbnuts at the park. You know what? I don't like America. I won't make America great again. Durka, Durka. I think I'm going to complain. So he's complained. It's went right up the fucking ladder until finally somebody, probably not Biden, because let's be honest, he's not cognizant enough to make any decision on anything. He probably has to be led to the bathroom and reminded 4 or 5 times to wash his hands. Nope. Somebody complained about it. So it came down from on high that we cannot display American flags in United States national parks. I don't like that. I don't like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a little nationalistic. There's nothing wrong with being proud of your country. And let's be fair now, there's a lot of things in the United States that we should not be proud of. One of which, well, it's 2 of which, if you consider both candidates, is that we have 350 plus million Americans, and Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the cream of the crop. They are the best we can fucking do, and let me tell you, we are fucking doomed. That is not what I really wanted to complain about. What I really wanted to complain about, Trump. No, I usually don't complain about him that much because I am not in Biden's camp, but we're going to complain today. Turns out he was at a libertarian hoodoo. That's right, a little get-together where all the libertarians got together and I guess they sang Kumbaya and roasted marshmallows or whatever the fuck they were doing. Well, Trump showed up there, and I guess they did not like that because they booed the ever-loving shit right out of him. But while he's there, now let's be honest about Trump. Trump is very transactional. Trump, when he's in a crowd, he tends to say what he thinks that crowd wants to hear. So he starts going through some of what he thinks are the libertarian talking points. And he gets that, I guess, from watching Fox News. And if he ever watches CNN or whatever, or TikTok or wherever the fuck he gets his news. So he comes out and he says, I am going to protect cryptocurrency. Okay, so I can get behind that because I've recently started making some money on crypto. And then he says, I am going to release or commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. Huh. Well, I can't get behind that. Now, for those who may not know, Ross Ulbricht was motivated by ideology. He was a criminal, and he thought that he could change the world by becoming the world's largest drug dealer. And that's exactly what he did. He opened up this thing called Silk Road. Now, that's not why so many people kind of support this guy. Why they support this guy is that Ross Ulbricht gave Bitcoin its first real mass use case because Silk Road, a dark web marketplace, the only thing it accepted for payment was Bitcoin. And that is exactly what gave Bitcoin enough traction that today you see Bitcoin being sold for, I think, $69,000 a pop. That's Ross Ulbricht. Now, Ross was ultimately sentenced to 2 life sentences plus 40 years. Now, why was he sentenced to that? Well, other than being the largest drug trafficker on the planet, a la El Chapo, he also engaged in murder for hire schemes. He tried to have 6 people murdered, but he was a bit of a dumbass. So this guy contacted Ross, and he's like, I know who you are, and I'm going to turn everybody in unless I'm paid. Well, Ross Ulbricht, dipshit that he was, he contacts who he thinks is a hitman on the dark web. Let me tell you something. You don't have hitmen on the dark web. You don't. That shit don't work. Anytime you think you're going to be talking to a hitman on the dark web, you're talking to law enforcement. And they're sitting there going, boy, we got us a fucking idiot on the line today. And they're going to give you time. So Ross Ulbricht reaches out to a cop who he thinks is a hitman. He says, I want this guy killed. What's his fucking name? Well, his name is this. I could do that because I'm a hitman. I'm not a cop. Cop loads up in his cop car, drives down to the supposed victim and says, hey, don't know if you know this or not, but Ross Ulbricht is going to pay me $500,000 to kill your fucking ass. But you're a cop. I know I'm a cop, but I'm fucking tempted. What happens is they stage a murder. I guess they pour ketchup on the guy. They take a few pictures. They send to Ross Ulbricht, and Ross Ulbricht is just as happy as a queer in a dick tree. You like how I threw that one in? That's what I did. Needless to say, I do not support Ross Ulbricht getting released immediately. I don't think that he deserves, well, he went through appeals court. He now is serving 1 life sentence plus 40 years. I don't think he deserves that amount of time, but I do think he should serve a solid 20 years. So I said that on my fucking Twitter. Because I got access to all the Twitters, all the Googles. I said that on my fucking Twitter. Well, you would have thought that I'd walked right back into that same church that I shat on the altar on. And once again, I took another shit right on top of the altar. They went fucking ballistic. I had the cult of crypto. I had the libertarian numbnuts. I had all these people coming out of the fucking woodwork saying, well, Ross never did anything. He just built a website, man. That's all he did. The only thing he did is built a website. Like, yeah, a website for trafficking fucking drugs. Well, but that was your choice. He didn't tell him to traffic drugs. Dude, do you know who the fuck you are talking to? I built the precursor to that bullshit. I know what the son of a bitch did. And let me tell you in no uncertain fucking terms, he knew what he was doing. He was fine with what he was doing. And he tried to have 6 people murdered. But he didn't really, that was a scam. The cops set him up. He didn't really have anyone murdered. So that doesn't fucking matter. It still fucking counts. Not only that, but at least 4 people died from overdoses because they bought drugs from Silk Road. Now, here's the thing, guys. You can say whatever you want to say. Think of El Chapo, all right? If you're trying to say that Ross Ulbricht didn't do anything wrong, he just built a platform, and on that platform, people engaged in buying and selling drugs, and that's not his fault, and he never tried to have anyone murdered, and he never murdered anyone personally, you can say the exact same goddamn thing about El Chapo. The exact same thing. He built a platform, this being a drug cartel, he built a platform that facilitated the trafficking of drugs. Did he actually stand on the corner and sell any drugs? No, he did not. He ordered people murdered. Did he actually murder anybody? Well, in his case, he did. But other than that, there are several similarities between Ross Ulbricht and El Chapo. I guess the glaring difference between the two is that El Chapo will kill your fucking ass. He means what he's doing. He's not a fucking idiot. Ross Ulbricht, he's a fucking idiot, guys. And I don't think he needs to serve that amount of time, but he needs to serve a solid 20. And we're talking about a guy who absolutely shows no contrition whatsoever for any of the crimes that he has committed. I know that the cult of crypto is out there and they support this guy. I know a lot of libertarians support this guy, but I urge you to take a step back and look at things objectively. All right. I had several comments. I had one guy that was arguing that all drugs should be legal. And my response was, okay, so that's PCP, that's methamphetamine. And he's like, absolutely make everything legal. And I was like, so since you're for that type of access, at what age should people be allowed to access those drugs? Well, he started hum-hawing around because he was trying to adopt the libertarian point of view. Well, it should be free to accessible to anyone. I was like, so you're fine with a goddamn 10-year-old taking meth? Well, I don't know about that. Oh, so you do believe that there needs to be some limitations on some of these drugs? Well, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. That's not really what I'm wanting to bitch about. The Pope Francis. I like Pope Francis. He appeared on 60 Minutes a couple weeks ago, and you would have thought that the Pope walked right into the Vatican, took his little white robes off, squatted down, and shat right in the middle of the Vatican. I know, I'm doing a lot of that today. Why would you have thought the Pope would have taken a shit? Well, because the Pope simply said the truth. And I know that's a surprise when we're talking about a lot of priests, especially those priests who have all the big wheels parked out in the front yard. Which it's a lot of, it's difficult to get. It's difficult to get the truth out of some of these priests, especially when they're wanting to squirt salvation into the souls of the youngins. What the Pope said that caused so much, it caused so much chaos and consternation. What he said is he said, and I quote now, bear with me for a second because this is going to be shocking. He says that people are inherently good. Yeah, that's what the fucking guy said. He said that people are inherently good, and you should have seen all these fucking Christians with their fucking heads popping off, exploding. He can't say that. That's not what the Bible says. Well, you're right. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that people are inherently bad, that they're evil, that we're born in sin. I do not believe that. Which I guess is one of the reasons that we're doubling down on some of the Bible talk today. I believe that we are inherently good, that we're born good, that a society cannot function properly if most of the people in the society are evil, as the Bible is wont to say. You have to have good people. And those good people work together for a properly functioning society. And then rules and laws are placed into effect for those fucking idiots who aren't so good. Like this guy sometimes. That's what I wanted to bitch, moan, and complain about. We're going to riff some more on that as the episode continues, but let's check in from the headlines. From the headlines, and as long as I'm pissing people off, we may as well continue to piss people off. We're talking about how the White House signaled that the Rafah strike did not cross any red lines whatsoever. We're fine with that Israel decided to bomb the ever-loving shit out of some refugee camp or a bunch of innocent people. We don't give a flying fuck. I keep beating this drum, and I keep getting lambasted over it from a decent amount of people. First of all, I support Israel. I do. I absolutely recognize Israel's right to exist. I think that the Jewish people have underwent historically just tragedy upon tragedy. October 7th was a shocking moment, not only for the nation of Israel, but for the world at large. And something had to be done in response for that. We cannot continue to let Hamas operate and exist when they are actively planning the extermination of the Jewish and Israeli people. We cannot, all right? For those people who are doing the protests on college campuses in support of the Palestinians, I do support the Palestinians. I think the Palestinian people absolutely should have their own state, all right? However, it appears that many of those people who are protesting on college campuses aren't so much supporting the Palestinians as they are supporting the ideology of Hamas. All right, so I just wanted to say that. Now, the reason I preface everything with this is I can support Israel and their right to exist and their right to stomp out Hamas, while also calling out the bullshit that Israel is doing wrong. There have been 35,000 innocent Palestinians murdered in the Gaza Strip. 35,000. Population's only a little over 2 million. All right, so 35,000 have been murdered by an IDF, Israeli Defense Force, which is more bent on revenge than justice. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to keep saying it. It is times like these. It is times, especially after October 7th, when 1,700 Israelis were murdered by Hamas. It is at times like these when it is of the utmost necessity to be humane and just, to make sure that you're able to set your thirst for vengeance or revenge to the side and treat people as human beings. It is at times like these when you will know a society by how they treat their enemies, by how they treat their incarcerated. And unfortunately, Netanyahu, members of the IDF, they are not being humane. They are not being just. Now, I am arguing almost daily with people on Twitter who they come out and they say, well, those numbers are exaggerated. Those numbers are fake. Those numbers, the people that you're seeing, they're deep fakes. The shame of that is the tone deafness of the people who say that, because it wasn't so many years ago, and it's still going on today, when you have certain people that look at the Holocaust, when 6 million Jewish people were murdered, and they like to say, well, those numbers are exaggerated. Not nearly that many people died. Guys, I would urge you to not have that argument. I would urge you to be objective, to understand that it's okay to take a side, but understand that when you take a side, that it's also okay to call out when that side is doing something wrong. And right now, by God, they are. All right, on today's main episode, we're talking about the Bible, whether one should read it as a literal thing, that every single thing mentioned in there is factual, or whether people should read it figuratively as an allegorical type of thing, saying that just getting the truth, looking for the overall truth that's in the book. I've already mentioned before why I wanted to talk about that. The Pope the other day, it's interesting. I really like Pope Francis. I really do. I know that a lot of people don't, because he doesn't hate gay people, and he tends to speak things sometimes that make sense that aren't necessarily part of the text, and people lose their fucking shit about that. But I like the guy simply because of that, because it's refreshing to hear a man say something that we inherently know is true. Now, and I take, I said during the Bitch, Moanin, Complainin segment about the Pope saying that people are inherently good. Just pause for a second. I know I've got some Christians out there that's going to be like, oh yeah, they're not. We're born into sin, Bretty. You cannot tell me that a newborn child is evil. You can't, because that shit don't make any sense. All right. It doesn't make any sense. That child is not evil. If that child were to die, if there is a heaven, I promise you, in no ungoddamn certain arguments, that little rugrat is going back to the bosom of God. He ain't going down to stoke the fires of hell.
That thought is evil.
That thought is evil. And we have to get to the point where we're understanding this, all right? And I pulled up this quote from Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is he's dead now, but he was a philosopher. He wrote several outstanding books. He's best known for The Power of Myth, which was a series and a book that was on NPR. Bill Moyers did this thing. But he also wrote Hero with a Thousand Faces. He wrote The Masks of God. He was very big in looking into mythology and understanding the importance of mythology or theology, understanding the importance of that, but also tracing the commonalities of different mythologies throughout world history. All right. And it turns out that he also helped make a little movie called Star Wars. So that hero's journey of Luke Skywalker, it turns out that George Lucas was a friend of Joseph Campbell, and they talked had several different conversations about mythology and about how that should work and about that hero's journey of Luke Skywalker. So you take that Luke Skywalker journey and you can apply that to most other religions that are out there, that singular hero's type of journey. It's really outstanding. So I urge people, if nothing else, to look up The Power of Myth. There's a book that you can buy, but there's also a series with Bill Moyers that you can probably pull up on YouTube or something like that. Anyway, this is a quote from Joseph Campbell talking about the Christian story. And Joseph Campbell says, the Christian story amounts to a refusal to affirm life. In the biblical tradition we have inherited, life is corrupt, and every natural impulse is sinful unless it has been circumcised or baptized. The serpent was the one who brought sin into the world, and the woman was the one who handed the apple to man. This identification of the woman with sin and the serpent with sin, and thus of life with sin, is the twist that has been given to the whole story in the biblical myth and the doctrine of the fall. I don't know of it, the idea of the woman of sinner in other mythologies, is anywhere else. The closest thing to it would be perhaps Pandora with Pandora's box, but that is not sin. That's just trouble. The idea in the biblical tradition of the fall is that nature as we know it is corrupt, sex in itself is good, sex in itself is corrupt, and the female is the epitome of sex, is the corrupter herself. So the Bible's very clear that we are born into sin, and I don't buy that. I don't. So I don't. I understand why it's there, because the writers, I'm not saying God, I'm saying the writers needed people to sign on to their religion. That's what they needed. If you look at that book, you've got Jesus that talks about how the meek shall inherit the earth. And I understand that the definition of meek is different than what it's put forth in the King James Version. The old school language defines someone as meek as someone who has power, but chooses not to exercise that power. And that individual will inherit the earth. The way that meek is presented these days in the text is someone who is weak. The weak shall inherit the earth. And that doesn't, let's be honest, it doesn't make much fucking sense to say that. All right? It doesn't. The argument that I'm trying to put forth, that I'm talking about today, goes back to that idea of whether the text is divinely inspired. If it is divinely inspired, if, as some of the people who were arguing with me, if that text is simply dictated to the writers, then that means that that text is infallible, that every single thing in it is true and it cannot be questioned. All right? That's what that means. Now, do we believe that every single thing in the Bible is true? Well, if you do, let's talk about Genesis. Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2.
I was going to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Back then, I mean, it was so long ago. Do you think that writing was a skill that not a lot of people had?
That's really interesting. So what's kind of interesting is the Gospels were written somewhere between 45 to 95 years after Christ or Jesus died, okay? So up until that point, and we've got this whole tradition of an oral narrative, okay, from the Sumerians all the way through tribal, even the Greeks at one point, their history was passed down through oral tradition. Now, that does not mean that the oral tradition was not preserved. It absolutely was. But at the same time, you didn't have a lot of people that were writers that that could write or even read. It wasn't until the advent of the printing press that we had a lot of text that was sent out there. As a matter of fact, what happens is in medieval times, this is really interesting. In medieval times, you didn't have people that could read the Bible. You had the Catholics, and they kept that shit close, all right? But those same Catholics were very good about having miracle plays. For those who don't know what a miracle play is, you have these huge traveling wagons, all right? And they would go into a village or a city or something like that. And inside of the wagon, you had 3 tiers, so 3 stages. And they would unfold the wagon, set everything up. The bottom stage was hell. The middle stage, the second story, was earth. And then the third stage, the top, was heaven. And they would put on a play, all right, a play that would talk about and give the people who could not read, who were very uneducated and ignorant, they would educate people on the ways of the Bible through these plays, these miracle plays, all right? It was later on that people started to read, and for those who may not understand, who may not understand how popular reading was back in the day, think of it as before the cinema industry collapsed after COVID. You've had blockbuster movies. Think about the lines that were formed to watch Star Wars. That's much of the same way it was for many of these writers. When Charles Dickens died, for example, news of his death came to the United States, and there were so many people gathered on the pier to just hear the news that the pier collapsed. All right, reading it was very, very popular, and what happened is you would have these libraries, and people would you would get the book, and the entire family would gather around, and you would take turns reading. So you didn't have radio and stuff like that. You would have a book, and that became the way that you would entertain each other, is by reading these things. So text becomes very important. Before that, it was word of mouth and that oral tradition that gets carried around. And before the printing press, you had to write that shit down. So
I think a lot of people assume nowadays that everyone had a Bible. Back then.
Yeah, and they didn't. You did not. I mean, and even if you had the Bible, you wouldn't be able to read the goddamn thing. All right. So the Catholics had a lock on the Bible until this guy named Martin Luther comes around. And Martin Luther comes around, he nails these 95 theses. No, not feces. He nails these.
That's a lot of feces.
I know, it's messy, but he nails these 95 theses on the door of the church. And basically what Martin Luther said is he said, first of all, anyone can be a preacher, so it doesn't take a priest. And then he says, hey, you don't have to give all your fucking money to the church. And that causes Protestantism to spread like wildfire across Europe, because all of a sudden those kings were like, I don't have to give my money to the church, and I can stay and I can keep it. I still go to heaven. Oh, shit. I sign on to you, man. So that's what happens. All right. That's what happens.
Did they have lowriders?
I love lowriders. A little lowrider church wagon. All right. So looking at Genesis chapter 1. We're going to read through this, and we're going to read over Genesis chapter 2 as well. Why? Because we fucking can. Let's put on my best Bible voice, because we are going to piss a lot of people off on this one. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day. And the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. Dry land is not a myth!
Dry land is not a myth! I've seen it! Kevin Costner, Waterworld.
And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. And the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And God then said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so, and the earth brought forth grass. And there's a whole list. So I'm not going to continue to read it because it takes a little bit. There's a whole list of the things that was created on those 6 days, because we know that God rested on the seventh. Now, what's interesting, Genesis chapter 2 does that same thing, right? It absolutely does. Genesis chapter 2 starts out saying, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all of the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day, blah, 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 blah. These are the generations. So what happens is, if you read Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, the order of which things were created differs between chapter 1 and chapter 2. Not only that, but the way that God creates man and woman differs on both of these. And here's what's going to piss people off. Differs on both of these creation myths. Myths. It's different. Now, why is that? Now, there's going to be some people, it's not different. It's not. It's the same. He's just breaking it down. I mean, yeah, well, I mean, who gives a shit if he made the earth first and then the light after that? But, you know, he took the rib out of Adam and he made okay, yeah, it says over there he makes them both at the same time. Quit confusing me with the facts. It's different. The order of creation is different, okay? So if you're trying to tell me that the Bible is infallible, that not only was it divinely inspired, but God told the writers exactly what to write down as in dictation, then you're telling me that God screwed up the order of creation between chapters 1 and chapter 2. That's what you're telling me. That doesn't make much sense to me because God is, by definition, infallible. Man is fallible. So there's some disconnect there because God would not put two creation myths. Now, here's why those are there. Those are there because they appeal to two different demographics of people. One agricultural and another industrial. That's why the order is different. That's why in one creation myth, you have the lands that are built, that are created, then you have the herbs. And I say herb because it's got a fucking H in it, all right? The herbs are there, and you've got all of that. And you've got the other one that is different because it's trying to convince those people who are industrialists to sign on to the text, all right? It gets a little different, though, as we go through Genesis. Now, from my reading, again, we're all about taking a shit today. In my reading, Cain slew Abel, right? So Cain slays Abel, and then Cain is cast out into the land of Nod, where what happens? Cain is cast out into the land of Nod, where he knew his wife. Who the fuck did Cain marry? Because my reading of Genesis, it's very clear. Adam and Eve were there. They had some rugrats. Okay, they had Cain and Abel. We could even say, if you want to, we can say, well, you know, they had some girls too. Okay, if you want to say that, even though it doesn't mention that, okay. But Cain's cast out of the Garden of Eden, where everyone else was. And there he finds his wife. Now, he didn't marry a fucking monkey. He didn't marry a goat or a sheep. And I understand that in Minnesota, they had sheep for 30 years before they figured out they could get, wool from them. Cain wasn't like that. He married another human being. Okay? So this idea that the Bible is literal, there's problems with that. Noah's Ark, because we are definitely diving into Genesis today. Noah's Ark. Are you really going to tell me that now a cubit, and from what I understand, it's like 400. The actual dimensions are like maybe 300 feet long for the ark, 150 feet wide. A cubit is the unit of measurement that God dictated to Noah to build the ark. So a cubit is from the tip of your finger to your elbow. That's basically a cubit. All right, and it said the way that God ordered Noah to build the ark was, and I know that most people who have never read the Bible says, well, he takes 2 of every single animal. No, that's not what the fucking book says. The book says that for many of those species of animals, you're going to take 7 of the goddamn things. So 7 elephants, 7 tigers, seven bears, 7 lions, all that other stuff. It's the unclean animals, I guess the ones who were ugly, like possums, that you're only going to take 2 of those. All right. So are you trying to tell me that in a ship that was 300 feet or 450 feet long by 150 feet wide, and I think 75 feet high, something like that, are you going to tell me that you fit every single species of animal, of bird, of fish in that ship? No, you did not. The problem is that the writers at that point in time, they did not know that you had all these species of animals that were out there. They simply knew the species of animals in their own little circle of the world. And they said, as they were writing it down, oh yeah, Bill, we can fit every one of these motherfuckers in this boat. Let's go ahead and put it in there. 2 of them? Shit, no. 2? Shit. Put 7. Put 7. That way everything's all right. Now we won't worry about how's he going to feed them. Well, shit, I don't know how he's going to feed them. We ain't going to put that in the text. Let them figure that out them damn selves. Nobody gives a shit. We're going to put the story of the flood because everybody, and here's the thing. Yes, a flood happened. How do we know that? Because it's documented from Gilgamesh all the way down through the Bible and things like that. We know there was a great flood in that region of the world at some point. The Epic of Gilgamesh has documentation about a great flood as well. So you've got several different mythologies that reference a great flood at some point in history. So we know that the flood happened, but do we believe literally that Noah, first of all, that Noah built the ark? Do we believe that? Do we believe that Noah single-handedly built the ark? No, by God, he didn't. He had to have a crew of people, probably got a bunch of Mexicans to do it. All right? Because they're cheap labor.
Stopped by Home Depot on the way there.
Stopped by Home Depot. God, pulled up in his little Noah pickup truck. Hey, God told me to build a boat. How many people want to work today? And they're like, ASA! And they loaded up. And they all went and built the ark. So it took a crew people to do that. And we do not believe that every single animal fit in there because there's simply too many animals. So there's, and it's not just Genesis. There's, if you look at the 10 Commandments, God in one chapter in Exodus says, do not kill. And then 3 pages over, he tells everybody to go into the land of Canaan and slay every motherfucker that's there. All right, because God pulled bullshit like that in the Old Testament. God in the Old Testament is not the same God that's in the New Testament. God in the New Testament is the happy-go-lucky God that's like, oh, everything's fine. Love will conquer all. In the Old Testament, God's like, I'm going to slay every motherfucker that ever walked the earth. You son of a bitches need it. That's the Old Testament God. All right, so there's a difference. The thing is that God, by definition, is unchanging. So that Old Testament God, that vengeful God, is a product of the writers. There's a reason that if you look and read the Quran, Muslims are very good about not personifying God. They do not give God a gender. They do not attribute emotions to God. All right, because those things are man-made. Those things apply to man. Those are what makes man imperfect. God is a perfect being. Genderless, emotionless, God is there. Yes, God is good, but do not personify God. The Muslims are very good about that. And I actually kind of adopt that idea of God myself. I don't view God as a man or a woman. I don't view God as vengeful, of having emotions, of envious, of jealous. The Old Testament, I'm a jealous God. No, I don't think that at all. One of the interesting things is on that short where everyone was raising hell, I had a guy that was arguing the divineness of the Bible, and the way he argued it is he said, well, look at the Quran. Even the Quran says that, Jesus was real. And I'm like, dude, I'm not arguing that Jesus was real, but did you just use the Quran to support the Bible? Because the Quran's very clear in saying that Jesus was not the Son of God. I did not get a response on that. I did not. But we're talking about, I take a, and I don't want people to think that I'm some sort of authority. I'm not. Okay, I'm simply trying to find my own faith. I am, and I've been struggling with faith most of my life. I think that to me, if you can't question the things that are in the text, if you can't call out the problems that are there, or if someone attacks you for doing that, for simply asking questions, it seems to me that the people who are attacking you, that their faith is not strong enough to bear those questions. And it seems to me that if you are that person who is asking those questions, who's pointing out the problems of Genesis chapters 1 and 2, of the vengeful God versus the loving God, of all these contradictions, and there are, of these contradictions that are in the text, if you're that person that's doing that, it seems to me that you are truly looking for the truth that's there, instead of simply just taking things at face value. Jesus, my understanding of Jesus is that he was not the guy who really supported a lot of organized religion. I remember him showing up at a temple and getting pissed off because there were some people exchanging money in there. That's what I remember. I remember that when he died, that the temple was split in two. That's what I remember. See, it turns out that I do read a bit. I'm not the guy that just pulls this shit out of my ass. Looking at that, at an allegorical reading of the book, and we know that every single time, because it says it, every single time that Jesus speaks as an allegory, period. We know this because the book says, the text says this, all right? So if Jesus is speaking as an allegory, that everything that he says is there's truth in it, yes, but all those stories that he tells are allegorical. Doesn't it make sense that the text as a whole should be read as that? And if you do read it as that, does that detract or take away any of the truth that's in the text at all? I don't think it does. So if you're talking about, being born again, and the rite of baptism says that we are born again, that we are basically, we come out as a new individual. Are we really born again? No, we're not. We're not physically born again. We're spiritually born again. So that, again, is an allegorical reading of the text itself. All right. This idea of raising people from the dead, as Jesus did with Lazarus. Is it important that we take a literal approach to that and say Jesus literally rose this man from the dead? Or can we look at it more as an allegory, saying that Lazarus was dead in Christ, and Jesus, upon that visit, rose Lazarus from being dead in Christ to living in Christ, which is what the New Testament talks about a lot. So I don't think it's important that we take a literal interpretation of all of the miracles that are there. It's not, to me, it's not important that Jesus walked on water. To me, it's not important that Jesus turned water into wine, or that he cast out a legion of demons into a herd, flock, whatever the hell you call a bunch of pigs. All right. I don't think that's important. I think what's important is that we read the text and get the truth out of the text as it's presented to us. If you look at the 10 commandments, 11 actually, if you look at those commandments, you can really break them down into two things. And those two things are: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and love thy neighbor as thyself. That's really what all of those commandments amount to, is that. So as long as we're doing that, do we have to literally believe every single thing that's in the Bible? And I don't think we do. I mean, I truly don't. I think that, as Pope Francis said, people are inherently born good. I truly believe that. I do not believe that when you're born, you're a bad person. All right. And I think that if we can just stand back and rationally look at that we can agree on that. We don't have to have or blindly trust a text that was written by the hand of man that largely is all about subjugating a people. You know, you had the Jewish people there, and they were slaves, and the writers of the text had to come up with something to sit there and say, yeah, we know that you guys are going through the shit. We know this. We know it. We know it. Keep trucking along, because your reward is going to be in the afterlife. That's when everything's going to pay off. There's going to be streets of gold. There's going to be food galore. You don't have to worry about all that manna that you guys have been eating on that 40-year journey through the desert. There ain't going to be none of that. It's going to be chocolates. It's going to be all kinds of stuff. The text is there to appease and make a population of slaves feel better about their lot in life. So if you understand that, and you get away from that. Not only that, but look at the way, and Paul largely, or Saul of Tarsus largely, is responsible as the architect of Christianity. For those who don't know, Saul of Tarsus. Saul was a Sanhedrin priest. Now, Saul, on the road to Damascus, has a conversion. Jesus comes unto Saul. Saul is struck down blind on the road to Damascus, and he hears this voice saying, Paul, why for dost thou persecute me so? And Paul, who was all about murdering Christians, has a conversion, becomes a Christian, becomes really one of the most important Christians throughout history. All right. So Paul was a Sanhedrin, and in Corinthians, Paul goes on and on and on about talking about being a virgin and how important that is. And what people don't understand is that a Sanhedrin priest, those guys were married. So Paul was married at one point as well. Whether he, cast his wife to the side in order to pick up the Christian cross and carry it forward, I have no idea. But Sanhedrin priests were married. That was part of them being Sanhedrin. What's interesting to me is that Paul is very good about putting women in their place. And he walks through that, how the man is the head covering for the woman, and then God sits at the top, and all the information comes through God to man, and the man tells the wife how to think and what to do at the end of it. So you've got a lot of problems, I think, with a lot of the reading in the book, because I absolutely do not support the idea that man is over top of woman. I don't. I think they're equal. If you look at my house, yes, I make most of the money, but I absolutely do not run the house. You want to know who runs the house? Ask the woman. She'll be more than honest with you that the man typically is a man-child. And yes, he may, even more, the man doesn't even make most of the money. The woman makes most of the money. I'm not trying to say that we as men don't have a place in society. It's just that we as men have forgotten our place over the years. These days, a lot of men are Xbox fans and they don't work. That's a lot of men. But I think we need to get back to that. But what am I talking about? Shit, I don't know what I'm talking about, man. I'm talking about this idea of setting aside a lot of the supernatural that's in the Bible and getting the core truth that's there. All right, is what I'm talking about. I don't think that we have to read in or believe a lot of those supernatural elements that are there in order to find the truth that's inherent in the Bible of loving thy neighbor, of doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. I don't think that we have to do that. And I do not think, if you read the Bible literally, then you believe in an eternal hell. That if you don't, as John 3:16, I forgot what it was, but this idea that the only way that you can get into heaven is through Jesus Christ. I don't believe that. I truly don't. We've got so many other religions on the planet, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam. You've got all these other religions on the planet. You're not going to tell me that those people, if they live their lives correctly, aren't going to go to some sort of eternal hell. You've got over 2,600 different Christian denominations on the planet. All right, over 2,600 different denominations. Are you telling me that, and they all have different beliefs, are you telling me 2,599 of those denominations are not going to go to heaven, that they're going to go to hell because they believed in the wrong goddamn thing? No, you're not going to do that. Are you going to tell me that somebody who has never, who simply lives a good life, who works hard every single day to help their fellow human being, who tries to do the right damn thing every day and does largely succeed, are you going to tell me that that person, when they die, is going to go to a place of eternal damnation and punishment? No, you're not. As a matter of fact, there was a guy named St. Augustine. Now, St. Augustine was very interesting. Before he comes to Christianity, he was a Manichaean. Manichaeans, now that's not midichlorians like Star Wars. Manichaeans believed that the human body, the soul, was a battle place between good and evil. You see, Christianity didn't believe that until St. Augustine came over and kind of incorporated it into that. That's the truth of the matter there. St. Augustine is one of the biggies of the Bible and Christian faith. All right. And St. Augustine did not believe that if there was a hell, that it was an eternal hell. He did not believe that a loving God would ever cast out his creation to be eternally punished. And that's one of the architects of Christianity that believes that. So there's all kinds of different ways that we can that we can look at problems with the Bible and why we should be reading it as allegory, not as a literal interpretation. If you look, and it's not just the King James Version. The Catholic Bible, which was around long before King James, the Catholic Bible has books in there that's not included in the King James Version. All right? There are, other than the Catholic Bible, there's a whole set of books that are not included in the King James Version. There was this thing called the Council of Worms, where they sat down in a little powwow and they figured out which books were going to go into the King James Version. So you didn't have the Book of Thomas, you didn't have Judith, you didn't have Bartok, you didn't have the Apocrypha. There were several different books that are in there. So why is that? Well, because those books, if they had been included, are questionable. They don't always go along with the narrative of the other included books, but still they were written or supposedly divinely inspired. So again, you're telling me that you've got the Catholic Bible, you've got the King James Bible, you've got all these different interpretations, and it's not just those Bibles, you've got a whole shitload of Bibles throughout the years. You're telling me that those are divinely inspired, that they were dictated by God to the hand of man, yet they differ. That is impossible, because God, again, is infallible. God is unchanging. If God dictated it, by God, that's the way it is. Yet, you have differences throughout the text, throughout the books, all the way through. And that, again, is why I do not advocate a literal interpretation of the Bible. I advocate an allegorical, because that's what Jesus did. That's what Jesus talked about. Now, I think we're going to close it out at that point, because I ain't got nothing else to say. And I'm sure that somebody's going to be pissed off about this. But I would urge you, I truly would, I would urge you to just think about this. Think about it. Do you really believe that people are born bad in this world? See, I don't. And I've seen a lot of bad things in my life. I've done a lot of bad things in my life. But I don't think I was born that way. I think that I chose to be that way, and that my upbringing and parts and elements of society led me to do those things, just as I think that parts and elements of society and my fellow human beings helped to give me a chance to turn my life around. All right. The Bible, I want to tell you, I wish, I've cussed a lot, I've joked a lot. I truly wish that, and I'm looking for that, guys. I truly am. I'm looking for to have that type of faith. I would like to have that. All right. But I cannot have that blindly. You know, you have this thing called epistemological knowledge. And that simply means knowledge that does not have concrete proof. Faith. All right. I believe in the Bible epistemologically. There's no solid evidence that anything there that takes really happened. But I believe in it because I have this epistemological knowledge. All right. This knowledge maybe from God or what have you. I have faith that happens. And I think that's a lot of the problem. People don't understand the difference between that type of concrete proof and that type of epistemology that gives you knowledge. And that I think that comes with a lot of arguments when people don't understand the basis of their own knowledge. I'm trying, guys. I'm trying. I'm 54, and I'm trying to come into that knowledge. I think that I think I'm getting there. I do. I think I'm getting there, but I'm not getting there by being the person that just simply swallows anything that anyone says. I'm the person that's going to ask these questions because I believe that asking these questions leads to a deeper knowledge and a deeper amount of faith and gets at the truth of the Bible. The Bible is a work that it's a work that we don't have to have all of the supernatural elements, all of the miracles that happen. We don't have to have that in order to gain knowledge, value, insight, understanding, and truth from the book. Those things exist outside of the titillation that people like to talk about in the Bible so much. My name is Brett Johnson. I'm not sure if this show's worth a fuck or not. That's the main episode. We're going to move over into Art of Accountability. And so I went to Berlin. I drove to Atlanta to catch the flight out of Atlanta because if I flew out of Birmingham, it was going to take me another 5 or 6 hours wait, and I didn't want to do that. So I drove to Atlanta. I stayed in a Holiday Inn Express, which, let me tell you, fucking nightmare. As I checked in the room. My room was okay. I know the hallway smelled like pot because it's fucking Atlanta and it's by the airport. So I check into the room. Then I decide, well, I want something to eat. Now, here's the secret with Bretty. When I'm traveling, I often choose McDonald's. Why? Because, yes, they fucking suck, but they're consistent. They suck at the same plane level in every single country on the planet. You know exactly what you're going to get. So that's what I tend to do. So I get back on the elevator because I'm going to shoot down to McDonald's, get my, filet of fish, get my quarter pounder, whatever the hell. So I get on the elevator and there's this biker dude on the elevator. And I walk in, I press the button. I was like, hey man, how are you doing? Not good. My room smells like someone pissed in it. Well, someone probably did. My room does not smell like piss yet. What do you mean yet? Well, the night is young. And he looks at me like, holy shit. I get out. The last I saw of biker dude, he was having a very spirited conversation at the front desk. Because I like to push buttons sometimes. But the reason I'm telling that story, usually when I'm traveling, I turn on the TV and I turn it over to Comedy Central and I just watch South Park throughout my stay at the hotel. That's what I do. I pay attention to it sometimes, but it's my background noise because I love Cartman, okay? So they did not have Comedy Central. So I'm flipping through the channels, and I land on one of my mortal enemies, Joel Osteen, the preacher down in Houston who drives Ferraris. That guy. Now, why is he a mortal enemy? Because God don't need your fucking money. Jesus actually said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, unto God what is God's. That whole idea of tithing, that 10% comes from the book of Malachi. Old Testament. Old Testament. The New Testament fulfilled the Old Testament, meaning we don't have to follow the bullshit that's in the Old Testament. We don't sacrifice animals anymore. We don't have a sitting stool because we're not supposed to walk any more than 30 steps on a day. We can eat fucking shrimp if we want to. And pork. Why? Because pork chops taste good. Bacon tastes good. Well, sewer rat may taste like pumpkin pie because I wouldn't know because I wouldn't eat the filthy motherfucker. All right, so...
Look at the big brain on Brett.
Exactly. I want you to reach in that bag and get out my wallet. Which one is it? It's one that says, what does it say?
Bad
Something
motherfucker.
About bad motherfucker. That's my bad motherfucker. That's right. And I was watching Joel Osteen, and I made the mistake of actually watching him for a few minutes because I had never watched the guy. I had never listened to the guy. And let me tell you, yes, I believe he is absolutely going to split hell wide open if there is a hell, and he should. But what's the rule? The rule is that no matter what you say, as soon as you put the word but after it, it negates everything that comes before the word but. So I believe that the dude is a hypocrite. I believe that he uses people, but what he was talking about, I liked and I agreed with. He was taking a very psychological approach to the Bible. And he said, and this is one of the things, I truly believe this. He said that the only way that we grow as human beings, the only way we learn as human beings, it's not during those times when everything is going good for us. It's during those times of hardship and trouble. At those times is when we grow and develop as human beings. That's when we shine as humans. And I was watching that because that's truly what I believe. I don't think that we ever learn anything when times are good. It's when times are bad. If you want to know, me, I think that I have developed greatly as a human being because of going to prison, because of losing every single thing that I had, because of everybody that I thought that was a friend of mine was not, because of the abuse that I suffered as a child, because of the bad that I did to other people, and then understanding that bad and understanding the damage that I caused and feeling remorse because of that. It's those times that helped develop me as a human being, that helped me grow to the point today where I am introspective, where I am learning, and where I am anxious to know, the type of person that I am and why I do the things that I do and why I want to help my fellow man, not hurt my fellow man. It's those times of hardship that led to that. And Osteen was talking about that. So that's the art of accountability today, that you're not going to develop and grow as a human being when times are good. It happens during those times that are bad. And Osteen points out in what I was watching, he points out that, when it's happening, you ain't seeing that. You're just going through hell at that point in time. But looking back, those are the points when we have an opportunity to grow. And what's really funny is I was watching I don't really watch TikTok that much anymore, but I was going through TikTok and I started to get a couple of videos that alluded to the same thing. One of them was, it mentioned that, and it was Denzel Washington that was talking about it. God doesn't put hardships in your way unless he wants you to grow. And if you've got just an outstanding good life, that's probably the devil that's fucking with you, making sure that everything's fine so that you don't grow at all. So I just wanted to point that out, that, hardship, those bridges of troubled water, that's the point when we shine as human beings and we grow, and we need to understand that. So bear with it, weather the storm, come out the other side, and see what you've learned from what happened. My name is Brett Johnson. This is the Brett Johnson Show. If you guys don't mind, hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends about it, your enemies. We try on this show these days is about doing the right damn thing, about becoming a better person, about going through those problems that we've went through. I was thinking before I recorded and I've said this in regards to Monroe Myers, Ted Durbin, myself, if people like us can turn our lives around, and we have, if people like us can do that, everyone can do that, because we were absolutely, on that downward spiral, and most people never thought that we would be able to do that. Yet we were blessed with the opportunity to do that, and we did. We took that opportunity, and I'm telling you that if you can do that, if we can do that, that anyone can do that. I was thinking about my grandfather, Paul Campbell. He was not a good human being. He was not. He was somewhat crazy. He was very abusive. He was very violent. But what happened with that man is he ends up getting cancer. And when he gets cancer, he turned his life around completely. He became an entirely different person. He worked to help people at that point in time. He became a very kind individual. Probably the last 9 months of his life, he really was a very good human being. And I think about, we're talking about the Bible today. I think about that and how, the Bible says that it's never too late to become a good person, to turn your life around, to come unto God. All right. And come into God's bosom, I think is what it refers to. That's something that I think that we need to remember, that it doesn't matter where you are in your life. It does not matter. It is never too late to do the right damn thing, to turn your life around and become that good person. It's never too late to do that. It's never a straight line. You'll always backslide to some degree, but as long as you're continuing forward, overall, you will get there. And it's not an easy path. It's not. But let me tell you, it is 100% worth it. All right. So if you guys don't mind, share this, share the show with other people. Subscribe to it. Let me know what you would like to hear about. Let me know what you like and what you don't like. I absolutely read everything. I respond to most everything that I can. And I appreciate you guys taking the opportunity, the time to tune in, and the time for feedback. I truly appreciate that. My name is Brett Johnson. We're going to close things out. We're going to close things out by simply saying, at the end of the day, just do the right damn thing. Other than that, we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I truly appreciate it. Until next time.